Well, I think growing up in Zanzibar, which is in a way a concentrated cosmopolitan society.
This series of presentation is part of the Awakening Project.
And at that time, then I joined here. It was government Indian Junior.
Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Wala hawla wala quwwata illa billahi al-ali al-azim. Welcome to Learning from our History series of the Awakening Project of Khoja Shia International Muslim Community. In this series of presentations are conversations from various personalities of our community whose lives have touched many of us and generations before us, and in some cases inspired some of us. We believe that such conversations are of immense benefit to all in the community to understand our heritage as well as our community history. Awakening Project is a grassroots-led project that looks at challenges facing the community and how the foundational institutions of family, madrasa, and member can be suitably equipped to overcome these challenges. You will find more information on the challenges and solutions on the Awakening Project of Khoja Shia International Muslim Community website and various YouTube presentations. Today I have with us Sabirabai Jaffer. Salaam alaikum, Sabirabai.
Wa alaikum salam, Sibtanbai.
Sabirabai was born and raised in Mwanza. She currently runs a business project, Zamani. It provides services to help people connect with their own history by making family trees and doing research on behalf of them and record their oral histories as well. Additionally, it provides resource activities for people with dementia, especially from Asian background. Over the years, Sabirabai has collected a lot of resources on the Khoja community, such as artifacts, photos, books, videos, etc. Enough material to host an exhibition for the whole community. Welcome, Sabirabai.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
This is an interesting bio, Sabirabai, and I must say that it is refreshing to talk to someone who has dedicated time and effort to uncover family history and community history. I'm sure this must be an interesting journey, and we will come to it. But I'm just wondering, why did you combine this aspect of the family and community history and heritage with resource activities for people of dementia? I'm curious as to what could be the reason. Can you just sort of expand on it? Why did you combine those two in your project?
People with dementia quite often get stuck in the past. They forget the present very quickly.
Okay.
So anything from the past, any artifacts, any photographs, anything like that from the past, they can see and relate to. Sometimes it brings back some memories for them.
Right.
And quite often they feel happy if they recognize something, because most of the time they are so confused.
So in that case, dementia also played a part in your journey of heritage and finding about your own sort of past.
Yes.
So the dementia aspect of it led you towards your journey as well, would you say?
I think it reinforced really my need to do something.
Connection, I must say. Very interesting. Anyway, to begin with, thank you very much for being our guest, and thank you for providing me with materials on your grandfather, Marhum Nasser Virji. As you know, I am authoring a book to be published soon on the Khoja Shia Ishnashis of East Africa, their quest for new socio-religious identity from 1860 to 1960. And thank you very much. You were kind enough to provide materials on Marhum Nasser Virji from your family archives. Marhum Nasser Virji as you are aware, was one of the early pioneering personality who was immensely successful businessman, and together with his children contributed greatly in making our community what it is. Now, this is your father's side, but you also come from a well-known Ladamegji family from your mother's side.
Yes.
I'm sure during our conversation, we will touch upon both your father's and mother's heritage, as well as community history. And I think it must have been an interesting journey, which we intend to cover in our conversation. But let me begin with your childhood. Perhaps you can begin with where were you born, your parents, and your schooling, and any childhood memories you may have. So you can start. You can begin with perhaps where were you born?
I was born in Mwanza, on the Lake Victoria, and
that's the biggest lake in Tanzania. Is that correct?
Yes. Yeah, okay. Yes. And my father Abdul Hussain Nasser Virji, and my mother Mariam Bailada Megji.
Right.
My mother was born in Mwanza. My father was born in Mombasa, Kenya. And sorry. Yes, I grew up in Mwanza.
So you had your primary education
Yes.
In Mwanza?
I had primary education in Mwanza.
And what was the medium of instruction there? Was it English or
Gujarati? It was
or Swahili?
We started off in Gujarati and moved on to English. There was a long period of time it was all in English. Right. And then towards the end, we learned Swahili as well. But the subjects hadn't yet started in Swahili. That happened afterwards.
So you had your schooling in Mwanza, and all your families, both mother, father's families, were in Mwanza settled, or your father's family were in Mombasa?
No,
Mombasa, or
everybody was settled in Mwanza.
Mwanza by that time, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So we had.
So it must be, from my research, Nasser Virji family is quite a big family.
It is, yeah.
So perhaps you can give me some idea as to how many uncles you had and how many aunties you had from the Nasser Virji side.
My grandfather had 14 children altogether. Not all of them survived.
Right.
Okay. In the 3 children, lived until they were in their 20s and they died. So the surviving children were Abdul Rasul Nasser Virji,
right,
Hassan Ali Nasser Virji, then Gulambas Nasser Virji, older than my father. He passed away again when he was 27, 28.
Right.
And then my father, Abdul Hussain Nasser Virji, Ibrahim Bhai, and Ibrahim Chacha, and Mama Jaffer Chacha.
Right. So and you had the opportunity to meet all of them. Those who were alive at the time.
Yes.
You were able to meet.
I met Hassan Ali Wadapa, my uncles Ibrahim Chacha and Mama Jaffer Chacha.
So apart from your father, who was the most inspirational figure amongst them then, for you?
For me, I really admired Mama Jaffer Chacha.
What was the reason?
He was very hardworking, very kind, a very generous person.
Right. Okay. And so, in your childhood, did you have any sort of hobbies? Did you used to go somewhere to? Did you used to use libraries?
Oh yes, we had the British Library, and also had Ladamekji Library.
So tell me about Ladamekji Library. I mean, how did that come about?
My Nana, Ladamekji was instrumental in, putting up a lot of funds to have a library established in Mwanza.
Right.
So it was named after him.
Okay, yeah. Okay. So he was quite a big figure in Mwanza, presumably.
Yes, he was. He had he was also given 2 medals by British, at the time, for his services to the community.
Right, right. So that side of the family was presumably more also instrumental in making you more aware of your own sort of past history and all that.
Yes, absolutely. I used to hear a lot of stories from my mother about my Nana. Right. And his when this was years ago, when there were no cars there, or any other modes of transport. If he wanted to go on business, he would either have to walk or have to go on a machero, as they used to call it.
What? Machero is a Swahili word. Machero.
Yeah. You would have like 4 pagazis holding a chair.
Oh, right. Okay.
That he would sit on and go.
So
that was interesting.
So what sort of, I mean, you said that you liked reading. So what sort of books were you much more interested, which perhaps could have played a part in developing the interest in heritage and history?
I loved history. I used to read. We had at home, we had a small library, and my dad used to get National Geographic magazines and Reader's Digest, and Mom used to get Gujarati magazines that had stories in it, life stories.
What were the magazines in Gujarati that?
Chitralekha, Akhananand.
Oh, yeah. Chitralekha and Akhananand. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
So you were quite fluent in Gujarati reading at the time? Okay.
Yes, I was. I still am.
Right. Okay. And have you given that sort of inspiration of Matru Bhasha to your children? or not?
That passed them by, I'm afraid.
Okay.
It's just spoken, not written or read.
Right. Okay. Can you remember things that inspired you in your childhood that can be of interest to our listener?
Yeah.
Perhaps you can relate some things that, if you remember anything.
Yeah. I mean, when we go to mosque for majlises, we listen to what the stories relate to us are very much historical. And I always wanted to know, what happened after Karbala. For years we heard, every year we hear what happened, but then what happened, after Karbala. And it was really good that one of the alims actually stayed behind after 12 days of Muharram and recited the whole Mukhtarnama. And I didn't miss a single majlis that time.
Right. So,
I just absolutely, gripped me.
Right. Okay. So so history interested you then?
Yes, very much so. Yes, my mom used to tell me a lot of stories about her childhood, her trip to Kutch when she was only 4 years old. But she remembered so much about it that it was really interesting.
Isn't it funny that, Sabirabai, that many people find history boring?
Yes.
But in many ways, if you try and understand your own past and your community's past or your society's past, a lot of things come alive for you.
Yes.
and your understanding of the present becomes quite an important realization for you.
Yeah.
So
Absolutely.
no, I can understand why you were gripped by history, and of course it's an important part as humanity, because we are the only creation that Allah Subhanahu wa Taala has allowed us to think about the past, look at the present, and then think about the future. We are the only creation who can do that. So
exactly.
yeah. So you are now in UK presently, yes?
Yes.
So what happened that made you leave Africa? And perhaps you can now talk to us about your life in the UK. So let's start with what prompted you to leave Africa?
I think after independence, things started to get a little bit difficult, especially in our town. There were the availability of guns, I mean, the police had guns everywhere, and it was becoming a bit difficult.
Now, what time period we are talking about here?
We're talking about towards about 69, 70, when there was trouble in Zanzibar.
So soon after the trouble in Zanzibar in 64, 65, yeah?
It was a little bit later than that.
Right.
By the time it came towards us, it was about 68, 69, 70. And, we would be going for a ride in the car, and the police would stop, tell us to get out, and they would take the car for the weekend to drive and then give it back. Things like that. It was getting difficult. My father was getting worried about safety, really, my safety. So he just came home one day and he said, pack your bags, have your vaccinations, and we are leaving. And it was literally, he came on Monday and told me this. On Wednesday morning, we were on the plane, headed for London.
Right. So this was what, 1970s?
71.
71. So you came with your father and mother?
Just my father and myself first.
Oh, two of you?
Yeah.
And what about your brother, sister? How many brothers, sisters do you have?
I have 3 brothers and we are 3 sisters, 6 of us.
Right, 6 of you.
So,
and what about your siblings? Where were they then?
Yeah, my eldest sister and brother and another sister. So 2 sisters and brother were in UK.
Already?
Yeah. And
right. So settling an issue, or was it an issue? Was it a cultural shock for you still?
Oh, yes. It was a culture shock.
Right.
But I was, it was like, in a way, I was still a teenager. Right. It was quite exciting. Right. To come to UK, come to London, but I had done my O-levels in Mwanza. Right. But I had to repeat them here again, which I did. But then I was helping my father in his shop.
In the UK?
Yes. Okay. In UK, by this time my mother had come with my youngest brother, and we settled in East Dulwich, and my father got a shop, and I was helping him out a bit, buying things for him for the shop and all that.
So now the whole family is in UK. Yeah. By 1971, 72.
Yeah.
And then now talk to us about what you then settled yourself, got married here in the UK.
Yes. I got married.
Yeah.
I had 3 children. But it didn't work out. So I brought up my children myself.
Right. So your working life, how do you describe your working life as was it a single mother now then?
Yes.
Okay. So how do you describe your working life?
I, you know, I lived in women's refuge with my children. We took shelter there. And the women there were very helpful. And they saw that I had some skills. They saw how I dealt with my children. So they gave me a job working there with other, you know, mothers and children who had left fleet violence. And my job was to help moms to help their children settle and, you know, to support them when they left refuge and things like that. So that was my first job. And I got a lot of confidence from that. And I went on to do some more training. I did training in basic counseling, in community work, and started working in other organizations. But my work was in third sector. It was in, you know, voluntary
What is the third sector?
It's voluntary sector.
Okay, right.
So, you know, you're dependent on money, funding from government, from other organizations, from charities to run the projects.
Okay.
But all that time, my job was to, my passion was to help people to better their lives, help, you know, families to better their lives. So I worked in various different projects over 30 years of my experience of working.
Okay.
One of the projects was I was doing a pilot for Lord Chancellor's department on preparing young people for marriage, which was very interesting. And I, you know, at the end of the year, I gave them my findings, and they funded other projects through those findings. You know, and I trained and worked my way through to becoming a manager for a family center in Salaam. And I developed, you know, various services for families living locally. It wasn't just Asian families, that was for mainstream as well. And then about in 2000, it became quite obvious to me that my parents needed some help. So I gave up my work and moved back to London, and I feel extremely privileged to have had that chance to be with my parents for a few years.
Okay.
That's when talking to them about past, about their lives, about their parents.
We'll come to that in a minute. But in your sort of, I mean, it's a very interesting working life that that you went through. So you must have been quite well versed with terms like dying with a difference, and domestic violence, and diabetes, and fasting, and team building, and such things. What is this dying with a difference?
It's
that is, you know, I just want to know more about it. Perhaps you can.
Yes, I did provided some training for professionals and community workers. One of the training was dying with a difference. I mean, I had to do a lot of research myself to about this, but my stance was from the Islamic perspective.
Okay.
To make them aware of what the, you know, various needs will be when a person is like in the last time of their life. The fact that they may need to move the bed facing Qibla, you know, and things like that, really. And
was it appreciated by okay.
Yes, it was. I mean, it was community workers, healthcare workers, social workers, nurses. That was training for them, really, to be aware what the different needs might be.
Of a Muslim family.
Of Muslim families, I did a bit on Hindu. As I said, they had to do research on that as well, about Hindu customs as well, where they will lie the body flat on the floor, things like that. So those kind of things they needed to be aware of, and be, a bit more understanding of the family of that at that time, how they would be feeling and what their needs would be.
So would you say that that throughout the period that you're working, that the perception in the UK society, or at least the British society, changed and they understood better the needs of different religious people from different religious background, and they then accommodated them? Is that how you saw things panning out, developing, and
yes.
Today it is much better than what it used to be?
I think it depends where you are. If you in the voluntary sector, I think the thinking was much further than what it is outside that sector in general life. So it was that much easier to provide this kind of awareness. I mean, I spent all my 30 years raising awareness about needs of the different communities at every opportunity I got, so that that the service is provided equally to everybody.
Okay, just briefly, domestic violence, how prevalent it is amongst Muslim community? What would be your are there good evidences for it, that it's present quite widespread, or compared to other communities about the same, or less? Any idea that you can?
In my experience,
yeah,
it's prevalent in every community, in every walks of life. It doesn't matter if somebody is educated, not educated, rich, poor, doesn't matter where they're from. This domestic violence issue is prevalent in every walks of life, every society. And it's no more or less in Muslim community, although some sections of Muslim community believe that they have been given a right in Quran to beat a woman. The ayat they have taken it from. The word they have has been translated varaba in that ayat. Doesn't mean necessarily, that's not just one meaning, to beat a woman. It has other meanings too, to let go. If you have tried things, nothing is working. If nothing is working, you've got a choice to let her go. You don't have to beat her. And domestic violence is not just physical beating either. There are lots of ways somebody can exert their power over another person.
Yeah, it's a very sad state of affair.
It
when
is.
Domestic violence actually imprisons a person within those four walls, and the mental torture that then leads to.
Yes.
Anyway, Sabirabai, thank you for sharing these experiences with us. So with all these skills that you have, family to look after, how did you get into heritage and family and community history? How did your journey for this aspect of your life began? In other words, what made you aware of the importance of knowing your own family history or community history? That would be, I'm sure, interesting for the community as well, or our listeners.
Yeah. When my children were very young, one day they came home and said that people have been calling some people have been calling them names. And my son was only about 5, I think, and he was quite, upset by it. And I thought to myself, oh, what do I say to him? Don't listen to them or whatever, because these words do hurt. And for a child who doesn't understand, why he's being called that. So I decided that best thing is to give him the confidence and pride in himself. And to do that, he needs to know where he's come from. So I started telling him stories about my life in Mwanza, how, the things I used to get up to, we used to climb hills and, all the, school life and everything. And, our trips to Serengeti and all the animals I saw. I mean, obviously he was very interested in all that. But talking about, the fact that I was born in Africa, but, I am not Black because ancestors came from India, and they started to understand and they started to be more interested. And I could see the difference in him. I mean, at one point, I mean, he was only 5 years old. He used to say, when I was in Africa, I used to do that. And I thought, that's it. That's what I want. I want you to be totally engaged and feel that this is your heritage. This is your story, and that was my awareness of how important it is really for our future generation to know where they have come from, to know what their fathers, grandfathers, great-grandfathers went through. We, East African Khojas have got a unique story, unique history. What our grandfathers, my grandfathers, great-grandfathers, they came from Kutch at the age of 13, 14, some 12. They were sent on these dhows, sometimes just on trust of some people they knew, bring them over, to Africa, to Zanzibar mainly. And then, luckily my grandfather had his father already there. But my, my Nana had a relative that he went to. Some people didn't even have that, just somebody they knew.
So yeah, just because you brought your, you said that your grandfather had his father in Zanzibar. Talk to us about your great-grandfather.
Yeah.
Where was he born then? What was his name?
Virji Muraj.
Virji Muraj. So he was born in Kutch, presumably.
He was born in Kutch, very possibly in Rataria, because our family has been there for a long time. Was there for a long time.
And what was he doing there in Kutch? What we're talking about 1800s? Before 1860s?
Yes, before that, yeah. Yeah, around 1860s, 50s actually, for my great-grandfather.
So in 1850s, what was he doing in Kutch? What was his job description?
They were landowners.
Okay.
And they had farms. They used to grow cotton, amongst other things, quite possibly castor, because when I went there, I saw that these were the crops that were growing. So I'm just presuming possibly that was castor oil crop was something that they grew as well.
So was he? What was his beliefs like? Like was he Ismaili then?
Yes, they were Ismailis.
So when they came to Zanzibar, they were Ismailis.
Yes.
And so you had I read that Nasser Virji went in partnership with Ali Din of Islam. Now he was also a very famous businessman. So Ali Dina, how are you related to Ali Dina Visram in any way?
Yes, yes. Ali Dina Visram was my grandfather Nasser Virji's Fua.
So he married his father's sister, yeah?
Yes.
Ali Dina
So
Visram.
Virji Muraji's sister Sonbai was married to Ali Dina Visram. But even one generation before that, so Virji Muraji's father, Muraj Haji, his sister married Ali Dina Visram's father. So Ali Dina Visram's mother was related to our ancestors as well. So there was a two generation.
Right, right. So when your great grandfather came to Zanzibar,
Yes.
Nasser Virji, your grandfather, then followed.
Yes.
How old was he when he came to Zanzibar?
14.
So 14 years of age.
Yeah.
And the family were sort of Ismaili going to Jamaat Khana. By then the Jamaat Khana was there in, as I remember, 1838, Jamaat Khana was built in Zanzibar.
Yeah.
So, and then Nasser Virji went into partnership with Ali Dina Visram. Is that how the whole thing sort of then progressed?
Yeah.
On.
Nasser Virji first worked with his father for 4 years, helping his father in the shop, and then he set up his own business in Mikindani.
That is south of Tanganyika.
South of Tanganyika. There, in about 1887, he decided to go for, after his father passed away, he decided to go for ziyarat. So he took his wife, his mother, his brother Qasim, and they went to ziyarat. On the way, they picked up his grandmother, who had looked after him for 9 years when he was little. In Kutch. Picked her up and then went to, this was all in Daws, to Basra. From there, they went to Karbala.
So when he came back, he started, he went to Mikindani, or?
Yes, he went to Mikindani. He had bought, he passed from Mumbai, bought some, goods to sell, came to Mikindani, and by that time, the Germans had already come in Tanganyika. Sultan Bargash had passed away. His brother had taken over, who had given the rights coast of Tanganyika to Germans. Now, it was all happened at that time, and there was a lot of fighting on the coast. So when they got to Mikindani, he found that his godowns had burned down, and then he decided to wind up and go back to Zanzibar. From there, he set up business with his uncle Ali Dina Visram in Bagamoyo.
So they had a business now set up in Bagamoyo.
Yes.
And we are talking about 1880s?
1888.
1888.
Yeah.
Right. So then the partnership sort of progressed, presumably.
Few years they worked together. And then Nasser Virji decided to set up on his own. And so they parted their ways, and then Nasser Virji set up his on his own and developed business from Bagamoyo. He had 72 branches all over Tanganyika. And all the way up to Ujiji.
Right. And I understand beyond as well, you used to sort of trade in Bujumbura and places like that, from my, as I
Yes,
recall.
I mean, I have heard that as well from a cousin, that there is I think it was in Bujumbura, there was a shop still in the 70s, 80s, still with his name on it.
Right, yeah.
She asked them as to why, and they said that he was so trusted up there, that name was so trusted that they didn't want to change the name although the owners changed.
Can you recall anything that that can enlighten us about his trust?
Yes, this was in German time in Bagamoyo. He had ordered some shirts from India, and he had ordered medium-sized shirts, and they arrived. At that time, they would have to go to Boma office to pick up their goods.
So that's the custom. Boma is
custom office, yeah.
Okay.
To pick up the goods and pay the tax. And so he went there, and he paid medium size what the shirts were, paid the tax, brought them home. When he came home, he opened the package, and actually they had given him large size. And he straight away went back to Boma customs office and paid the extra, because he should have paid more for the larger sizes. And they couldn't believe actually that somebody could do that.
Yeah, but that showed how honest he was.
Yes.
And as I understand it from my own research, that the Germans authority allowed him to arbitrate because of the trusting nature, and the community trusted him. They allowed him to arbitrate between disputes between the communities.
Yes.
So,
yes.
And also they gave him a special letter so that he could travel outside East Africa without any hindrance and all that. So so that showed how honest and trust he developed his position to be in Bagamoyo and elsewhere.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. So tell me how he then eventually he also had branches in Mombasa, and then eventually he had to go to Mombasa.
Yes, I mean, it was when Bagamoyo's importance went down, when it I think when the railway was built and everything. So so Dar es Salaam became the capital. So they decided to move to Mombasa and have their head office in Mombasa. And so that's how they, so that was around possibly 1910, 1912, something like that.
How did Nasser Virji ended up in Mwanza? What happened for him to eventually go to Mwanza?
During First World War, a couple of things happened. One was that because of the war, he wasn't able to communicate with the older branches. And so I think there was a lot of things lost in that. Secondly, he had converted a lot of cash into gold, which the British government came to. Now, they borrowed from him. It's quite a large amount of money, which was never paid back.
Okay.
And I think in all that, he kind of basically lost everything, apart from one branch in Mwanza that was on his son's names, on Abdul Rasul and Hasnali's names. What else?
So basically, because that was the surviving business, he then ended up in Mwanza. What was the year that he?
About 1923.
All right. Okay. Yeah. So what happened in Mwanza then? I mean, how did he manage to then survive there?
Yeah. Well, as the Germans were fleeing, at that time, there were lots of businesses going quite reasonable. He found one business a few miles out of Mwanza. If you know Mwanza at all, when you know where the airport is, it is a few miles beyond that. And he obviously he didn't have any money, so he went to the bank to ask for a loan. But they refused. Then he approached somebody he knew. It was a a provincial governor that he knew from Kenya, from Mombasa. And he actually stood guarantor for Nasser Virji with the bank. And they lent him the money to buy this property in a place called Ihale, outside Mwanza. And there was a sisal ginnery there, a sisal factory, and I'm not sure whether cotton ginnery was already there or not, but you know, that was there at the time, and he bought that, and they developed it. I think they did grow cotton and used to gin cotton there.
So then that was his final sort of place of abode. He passed away.
Yes.
As I understand it, and buried in Mwanza.
Yes, he's buried.
How did you come about the diary and other archival material? How did that sort of came about? Presumably, you still have the diary.
Yes, I do. When
he written it in his own handwriting thing.
Yes, yes, it is, and it's not easy to read because it's not written in the Gujarati that we know.
Right. Okay.
There is a bit of Khoja mixed in it.
Okay.
And so you can read some bits, and there are some bits a bit difficult to read.
Now that's quite an interesting archival material for us.
Yes, I am at present putting together an alphabet with Gujarati and Khoja and everything in it, so that hopefully I can read a bit better one day.
Inshallah, and then decipher the information for all of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
But you asked me how I.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was going to say that. Yeah.
So in 2000, when I stayed with my parents, by this time my father was losing his sight a bit. So we would sit there together with a contraption which was attached to the TV, and it had a camera and on it. So we would go over the writing, which would project onto the screen, and you could enlarge it so that he could see what was written. And that's how we were trying to translate some of the bits of the diary. So that's how I knew my father had this diary. And then when he passed away, and I was clearing his things, I found more diaries written by my uncle Abdul Rasul.
Also, you have diaries of Abdul Rasul, your uncle, who became the president, chairman of Africa Federation.
Yes, that's right.
So you have got written diaries of his, yes?
Yes.
I understand that he also wrote a book in English about solar system. Have you got a copy of that?
Yes, I have. I have a copy of that.
Oh, because I was looking for it. Very, very good.
Yes, I do.
Perhaps you can send me the picture of that.
Yes, I can do that.
Yeah.
Yes, so, so found more diaries, photographs, letters, or quite a lot of things. And I thought, I'm not going to throw this away. This is extremely valuable. I didn't throw anything away.
So you've got all those material.
Everything. I have.
Would you say from 1923 onwards, or even before?
There are some photographs from 1905.
Of who?
It took me a while to find out what the picture was about, but it was about a wedding party at the wedding of Nasser Virji's eldest daughter in 1905.
That was in what, Zanzibar?
In Zanzibar, yes. Although he was living in Bagamoyo, this was in Zanzibar.
Right, right.
And he had apparently, I found out that he had hired a whole steamer and taken all his friends and family onto the steamer from Bagamoyo up to Zanzibar. Yeah, included some German couples in there, business people he knew. So that was interesting.
How do you express the personality of of Nasser Virji, your grandfather? I mean, did he touch people who he came across, whether he
Yes.
is of Africa origin, or Indian origin, or European origin. He touched all of them. And how did he communicate? In English or in
Do you know,
German?
I have got a feeling that he knew German.
Okay.
Obviously Swahili. I'm not 100% sure. That I still need to find out a bit more about, but I vaguely remember that he could speak some German. But he obviously has, Swahili and English.
So he was down to earth then, person.
He was down to earth. He was very kind person. There is one event that we in our family talked about, and that is he was going from Bagamoyo to inland of Tanganyika. So there were no roads at that time. You had to go through jungle, and he had the pagazis with him.
Explain pagazis.
Pagazi are they were African men who were taken on as workers to
assist,
carry, to assist to carry. And so there were pagazis with him, with all the stuff he was taking, goods he was taking to one of his branches. And on the way, one of the pagazis got ill. Now, it was quite risky. He stopped and said, to let him rest. It was risky because you were like sometimes in the middle of jungle. There were wild animals all around. But
and also and people who steal as well.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So they set up fire, and they waited to see if
so he looked after his employee very well.
Yes, absolutely. And then obviously that person passed away, and my granddad made sure that he was buried properly, and then they set off again. So I mean, this has really made an impact on me. His kindness. And yes, there is another instance I found in Africa Federation archives about one of the people who was running his one of the branches, said that this gentleman, I'm sorry, I can't remember his name, but he wanted to go to Kutch to get married, and he asked for permission to let go, and he was asked to stay on for a year, which he did, and then he went to Bagamoyo to see my grandfather to pick up his money, and he paid him adequately, and then on top of that he paid him the fares to go to Kutch to get married, which this gentleman obviously remembers very fondly of his kindness that he has that he has put in his story.
Right.
I mean, even in Mwanza, he was revered even by all communities really as the mzee of Mwanza,
Right. So how would you then your father became your father was Abdul Hussein
Yes.
Nasser Virji.
That's right.
And there is also your uncle Abdul Rasul.
Yes. Yeah.
He became the president of the the Africa Federation.
Yes.
Then there was also another uncle who became the president of Mwanza Jamaat.
Yes.
What was his name?
Muhammad Jaffer.
Muhammad Jaffer. Yeah. So growing up in that spirit within the house, community service and all that. What is the one thing that you learned growing up in that sort of atmosphere? Is there anything that can hit you, or they can sort of come to you in front of you to say, well, oh, this is what I learned being in this family who provided service to the community? Is there anything that one very good inspirational thing that came to you?
I mean,
I know I'm putting
the importance of community.
Right. Okay.
Building this community spirit. The importance of community has always stayed with me.
And I think that that spirit.
Yeah.
Do you think that spirit is now waning? It's weakening.
Yeah.
Or it is still as strong within the family.
You mean within our family?
Yeah, within your family.
Yeah. No, I think some members of the family are still very involved in in communities.
But what about your children and their children? Do you think that they are inspired by the fact that they have this community history behind them?
They are inspired greatly. It's just I mean, it hasn't been easy for them to really get into community, as you know, we had to move so many times and all that. So but I know that my nieces and nephews, a lot of them are very much into the community service and community spirit.
Okay, now I just want to sort of touch upon this particular journey that you embarked upon. Did that then take you to other places to see what your ancestors have done?
Yeah.
For the community and for the family. So I'm just going to mention some. Did you eventually go to Zanzibar to see what your great grandfather, when he arrived, where he stayed and all that? Did you manage to see all those places?
Yes, I did. I did go to Zanzibar. I mean, the house that my grandfather stayed in, it is still there, but we just could not find it when I got there, because we only had a few hours in Zanzibar. But the guide who was taking us, I sent him the photograph later on, and he took a picture of the house now and sent it to me. So I saw it. I saw it digitally. Right. But I saw the other, the stone town and everything where my grandfather stayed. It was like walking on the streets where he walked, and all that was so exciting. And especially I went to visit the Sultan Bargash's palace, because my grandfather was really taken by Sultan Bargash and his Jaho Jalali.
You're now talking about your Nasser Virji, yeah?
Nasser Virji, yeah. His Jaho Jalali and his lavish, way of his parties and things like that. By parties, I don't mean in a Western way. This was, like Eid functions and things like that. And just before I left for Tanzania, I had read a book called The Sultan's Spy Master. It is about Pira Devji.
Who Devji?
Pira Devji.
All right.
And it's a very, very interesting life story, about Pira Devji. He used to work for Sultan Bargash. So there's so much in there that has been, that I, when I went there, I could relate to, from this book and from my grandfather's stories and from his diary. So it was very interesting.
You were able to sort of create a good picture.
Yes, I felt like, I'm walking in his footsteps,
And when you went to Bagamoyo, presumably because that's where he also stayed and successfully carried out his businesses from there.
Yeah.
What was Bagamoyo like for you?
It was just magical. His Nasser Virji house is still there.
Yeah, I understand that it's now converted into Nyumbaya Sana, I think the House of Art.
Oh, excellent. I'm so pleased to hear that.
Yeah, that's the latest information I have.
Yeah, yeah. Because when I went, it was completely empty, and they were not sure what was happening with it. I did inquire at the Department of Antiquity, but they were not sure what was going on with it. But I'm so glad to hear that something's happening.
It's a house of heritage.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Excellent.
And I understand that you also went to Kutch. How was your journey there, which is now the abode of your great grandfather?
Yes.
Virji Muraj Haji.
Yes.
What was your sentiments like there?
Oh, so nostalgic. We had our base in Bhuj, and then we traveled to other places from there, and went to Rataria.
Right.
It was very sad in a way because there are no Muslim families there at all. So the graveyard is all completely like a jungle. But we did go there, and I have taken loads of pictures and things. There's no nameplates or anything much there left.
But the grave exists.
Graves are there, but I'm not sure they're family graves or not. But I went there. We went in Rataria. We looked around. So again, it felt like I'm walking where my ancestors have walked.
Now that's okay. So at least Kutch gave you some idea as to how your great grandfather's abode was like.
Yeah.
Now,
I mean,
go on.
If you don't mind, in Bhuj, now my grandfather's eldest son, Mamdali Nasser Virji.
Okay.
He was a businessman in his own, as well. He was based in Mombasa.
So he was handling the Mombasa branch.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. He went to Kutch, to Bhuj in 1911, very possibly on business. But he became very ill up there, and he passed away in Bhuj, and he's buried there in Bhuj Cemetery.
Right.
So obviously there was one I really wanted to find that. Right. So went to Bhuj Cemetery, and now a few years back there was a big earthquake in Kutch. So
2001.
Yes. And a lot of the graves, the stones have fallen. So half an hour we were spending there looking everywhere, couldn't find it, and then comes Aziz Ali Bhai Kotari.
Yeah, I know him.
Yes, and and he says, "Oh, whom are you looking for?" And I said, Mandali Nasser Virji. Oh, I know. Come, follow me. So
yeah, he's like a walking history as well.
He's absolutely incredible. And he was saying that he also has records from far back that he has rescued from the earthquake. So that's something for people to keep in mind. Anyway, he took us there, and must admit I was extremely emotional. I just burst out crying to see, his grave.
Right.
Mamdali Nasser Virji.
Okay, so now your journey to uncover your family history and the history of the community that you are born into, I'm sure must have provided you a better understanding of your past.
Yes,
with which,
absolutely.
With which you can now understand your present better, I suppose.
Yes.
So what advice you have for anyone who wish to embark upon a similar journey of uncovering their own history? Would you encourage them, and how will this search and the revelation will benefit them and their family. How do you think that they will benefit by it? If somebody wants to embark upon what you embarked, obviously in your case, it was I suppose in a way, a special family, because Nasser Virji, Marhum, did a lot of beneficial work and assisted so many. And also you had a family members who contributed greatly towards the community. But anyone who wished to embark upon this journey of finding about their own family history and community history, what would you say will benefit them? How will it benefit them?
It doesn't. Your ancestors don't have to be very well known or have achieved a lot or anything.
Mm-hmm.
Just knowing who they were, what made them tick, what they were like, it's just so important to then sometimes, just knowing what work they did or what their interests were, and you think, hang on a second, that's how, what I like. That is what, you can connect. And, there is so much to learn from what they went through, what they achieved, that is part of you. That is where you come from. And that is very, very important. It doesn't matter.
No, I think Sabirabai, with this, I think very important advice about the importance of finding out where you came from and your own family history and also community history, because you are in it, enjoying the benefits of the community life. I think that is a very important advice that you have given, to know about your past. And I think we will end this interview with that very good advice. Thank you very much for sharing your journey with us, in a way your life as well. But importantly, I think this journey of heritage and the family also should be part of people's endeavor to understand where they came from.
Yeah.
So thank you very much indeed. And inshallah, if you can send me the photograph or the book photograph of your uncle, the one that he wrote, solar energy, I think, or solar system.
Solar system.
Solar system. I will be very grateful. Thank you very much, Sabirabai, for sharing your journey with us. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, Khuda Hafiz.